the Toronto District School Board is being investigated by the Ministry of Education as to how 15 schools ended up taking their kids down September 18th to a Grassy Narrows rally, and it became a pro-Palestinian march. And some of the kids were then heard chanting, and so they held a special meeting on Wednesday at the Toronto District School Board. And the acting director of education again apologized to the parents and people affected by last week's events. There were a lot of great speakers at the event that wanted to tell their stories. One of them, I saw a reel of his address yesterday, and I thought, wow, I got to get this guy on the show. His name is Ali Siadatan. Hopefully I've pronounced your name correctly, Ali, Director of Education at the Emergency Coalition Against Hate. It unites diverse ethnic and religious communities to collaboratively confront threats to democracy. And I really wanted to have you on, Ali, because I think a lot of people who were born and raised here in Canada, who have never faced the threat of war or terrorism or anything like that, look at this and think, oh, it's no big deal. Look, the kids were just accidentally, they got pushed in and mushed in with these protesters, and it's really no big deal. And I think your story highlights why something that to some people can seem like no big deal actually is something we need to keep our eye on. So I really appreciate your time.
Yes, hi, Kelly. It's great to be with you. I'm the Director of Education at Tafsik. Yes, I got a lot of messages sent to me since yesterday, tons actually, from people who grew up under the Soviet Union and who left mainland China because of communism. And they are telling me they can completely relate, and they're sending me their own accounts of stories of indoctrination as children that it took them kind of a lifetime to get over. And so we have a nose for this. This is not at all what it appears to be.
Okay.
This is not a bad apple. You know, this is a systemic agenda of bringing in a indoctrination system that turns an entire generation into the direction of a particular worldview. This is what's happening in Afghanistan. It's called Talibanization. The idea is to start teaching kids from youth to have a particular worldview on a subject matter or even on a broad amount of subject matters, and then let them grow up and become the leaders of tomorrow. And since we have come from countries that have implemented such systems, we have a very sharp nose for it. And we're like, wait a second, that's what's going on here in the free world in Canada?
Right.
And so I really had to speak out again.
Listen, I love what you said yesterday. So if you don't mind, maybe you could reiterate exactly what happened to you in your story, because you said after September 18th, after you heard about students from 15 elementary schools, middle and secondary schools in the TDSB going down and becoming part of this pro-Palestinian protest without the consent of their parents, you felt it was time to speak up. So tell your story. You grew up in Iran, is that correct?
Yeah, when the revolution happened in 1979, a particular faction in the country took over the revolution, essentially, 6 months into it, and they were radical Islamic fundamentalists, Islamists, whatever you want to call them. You know, everybody in the country was Shia. That was the culture of the country. There's nobody else. It's not like, you know, it was Europe. So this was part of what was inside of the culture. But these guys took over the country, and they made Sharia law the basis of the constitution of the country, and they made the supreme leader the representative of God. That's the Article 5 of the Constitution of Iran. And so then of the Islamic Republic, and then they tackled the educational system. They hired this man, and they said he was a philosopher, a very prominent Shia scholar, and they said, you know, revamp the entire education system from grade 1 up to into the university system to have an Islamic basis. And so the schools became suddenly the place of indoctrination, and a war broke out with Iraq, the neighboring country, which amplified the government's need to reach into the citizenry and cultivate soldiers. And eventually that reached the teens and kids. And there was one person, he was kind of glorified. There were posters of him everywhere. which was this boy, and they called him Hossein Fahmideh. He was a martyr, Shahid Fahmideh. And then at school, when you went every day to school and you stood there, you got speeches told about all of this to you as you were standing there. You were chanting death to America, death to Israel, things that you didn't even know what you were chanting. It was all just meaningless from that point of view. And then you went to class and there was 1 hour of Quranic study added. And so you suddenly came under this indoctrination. And we came from families that were against the regime, that were mainly secular homes. And actually what was being taught to all of us in our homes was don't buy into any of it. Mm-hmm. But regardless, when you're subject to this every day and you're young, you don't have a brain, you don't have a lot of knowledge, but you have a lot of
your frontal lobe, but your judgment center is still not formed, and you're getting messages en masse. I want to just cut to the chase. So you go home one day.
I go home one day, and I'm under the influence of this, of this martyr, and I say to my mom, you know what? I want to go to Iraq, and I want to blow myself up under a tank, because that's what this guy did, and he was the model for all of us. And I was very serious about it. It wasn't a passing thought. I was thinking about it all the time. It was very euphoric. That was the feeling that would come over me when I would think about it, euphoria. And I was doing, God a service, the world a service, the country a service. Why not? This is a wonderful thing. And then eventually, the next year I was 10 years old, and then we left when I was 11. And moved to France and eventually to Canada. And when I became an adult, and I was in my 20s, my mom told me, look, we left. She said the day you came home and told that to me was the day I decided we had to leave. And I made plans, because when you were 13, you could no longer leave, because now they wanted you as a soldier. And at 16, they would take you to the front. So there was also an urgency. But she said that was the day I decided. And so this indoctrination affected me to the point where I was going to give my life. No one gave me a chance to weigh things and understand what was going on. I didn't have the mind for it, nor the information to weigh it. And so when you bring this type of a weight and put it on the shoulder of children, and you bring adult thoughts and you use them as tools, this is a form of child abuse. It's indoctrination. It's crossing a line. Parents have given their cherished children to your care, and this is what you're going to do with them? You're going to use them as tools for your agenda? I don't think so.
Do you feel like you were heard yesterday? Because your story is sensational. I mean, we're not living in that same climate that you described there. Our kids aren't thinking of...
has gone viral on the internet.
Yep.
And my phone is exploding with people messaging me from all kinds of directions, and people calling me, and even Iranians calling me and saying, I've played your story on rerun 50 times because I had the same exact thing go through my mind. I totally knew, I only had 3 minutes, but they're like, you were talking about Shahid Fahmideh. I'm like, yes. They're like, yes. This guy, this kid who was kind of brought up as the example for all of us. This is now an extreme example because a theocracy formed in the country. Here they are just pushing in to reverse the values of the Age of Enlightenment and the critical thinking procedures that are embedded in our culture. And it's coming first through the universities, and now it's being administered in the school system. And so this is something that's hitting a chord with all of us who've been through similar programs as children.
So how was your story received last night at the Toronto School Board meeting? What actually was the reaction, if at all anything?
Well, I mean, I think it came from the heart, and I think people felt that. One trustee asked a question, and she said, I want to thank you. I had goosebumps hearing your story. I could hear the sincerity of it. And she asked me a question, and people can listen to that as well. That's on the YouTube page. It's been filmed by the board itself, all the delegates, including me. I'm delegate number 15, if you want to go fast forward. And then another gentleman, trustee asked another question through Zoom. So I think that from the facial expressions that people were absorbing the magnitude of what I was saying, and I think it was hitting a chord. And from the question that the one trustee asked, that she could feel the emotion and sincerity, and she thanked me for coming and sharing that. You have to understand that I've never shared this story with anybody, publicly or privately. Even my wife's never heard the story. It's just things that sit with you. And then, they come out. And actually, now that I'm talking about it, and there's more to the story, I'm realizing how long I've actually hung on to these things, even though obviously I'm intellectually over it and spiritually over it, but still it's in you. And so it's very dangerous to put ideas this powerful deep into kids. That's why I'm calling it child abuse. It is a betrayal of the contract between parents and the Board of Education. This is a very serious issue, and it's part of a much larger picture. And people are waking up all over Canada because we've all been living our lives while it seems that a group of people have been ideologically concocting a strategy for the rest of us. And now the country's waking up and the majority of people are not on board.
Let me ask you this. Is it possible that there's probably somebody in their car right now, Ali, and I only ask you this because I think it's important to just ask you the questions that people might have. Is it possible these people are so ignorant they don't realize what they're doing?
No, not on the contrary. They're very much invested in the teachings of particular pedagogues from a tradition, and it's been taught at OISE, and now it's coming into the school system. I've friends who are principals. I've looked into it as part of my job to see what's going on. This is very organized, very thought out. The idea is to turn children into activists.
Yeah.
And as I said, to create a new generation of Canadians that sees the world in a very different way.
Should someone be fired?
Of enlightenment. The director of education should be fired immediately. Someone has to take responsibility for this, and the education system has to know that citizens will not stand for this. This is a taxpayer-funded education system, and the director of education should be fired immediately.
Listen, Ali, I think your story is so important to hear. It was very moving to watch you tell it on Reels. Also moving to hear you even elaborate on it further on the Kelly Contreras Show. I want to thank you for your time. I've taken up so much of it, but I think it's an important message you have to share, and you've waited so long to share it. I think it was important to get you on. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kelly, for having me. It was